From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Who gets the vaccine and when is a top priority in Rhode Island and has drawn the attention of the state's top prosecutor. Attorney General Peter Neronha has launched an inquiry into the vaccine rollout after news emerged that non-frontline workers at the state's two largest hospital groups had received the vaccine. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside my colleague, 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi, and we're going to talk about that and much more with our guest, Attorney General Peter Neronha. General, it's good to see you in person. Of course, we're quite a distance apart in the studio, but thank you for joining us. And I want to start there with your inquiry into the vaccine rollout. State Representative Charlene Lima has filed a bill to charge line jumpers with a felony. Do you support any legislation that allows you to pursue criminal charges against, these so-called line jumpers, or do you think you already have the statutory tools that you need?
Yeah, generally speaking, we do. And I want to be clear about this. We're acting in this space in our role as the healthcare advocate. We have a statutory role as the healthcare advocate, which is to advocate on behalf of the public where healthcare is of significant concern. Obviously, there's no greater healthcare concern right now than this pandemic we're facing, and how the vaccine gets rolled out fairly to the appropriate people is something which is of concern to everybody. And so in our role as a healthcare advocate, we want to know how it's being rolled out, if steps were missed, or if there are ways to improve how we're doing it, that happens.
It seems like you're sort of distancing yourself from the idea of a criminal case coming out of this.
Well, look, I think whenever I'm involved in anything, people immediately race to criminal, right? Because we do that 80% of what we do. But we have a lot of other roles in our civil division as healthcare advocate. Look, we took a strong position around increases in health insurance on the individual market last summer. That was in our role as healthcare advocate. So I don't want to overstep or overstate what it is we're doing. We want to get information. Now, obviously, if any information we get in any context might lead to a criminal case, obviously we'll pursue it. But that's not how I'm approaching this right now. We want to understand what happened and then take whatever appropriate action.
I did hear from some public health folks who were alarmed because, as you say, when you hear Attorney General reviewing, even if we don't say investigation, people think, oh God, someone committed a crime here. And they say at a time when it's so urgent to get the vaccine out, they worry about a chilling effect, a criminalizing of this process, which is already so fraught. What do you say to that concern?
Yeah, look, that's why I choose my words carefully. I mean, I can't really control how other people interpret what we do. I think we haven't been very good as an office over the years in identifying our roles outside the criminal space. We are really active in healthcare, in the environment, in consumer protection, and we're exercising that role here. So I don't talk about it in the context of an investigation. I don't talk about it in the context of a criminal case. Look, if we got evidence that someone was stealing vaccine or deliberately leaving it out so it would expire, clearly those are criminal cases. This is about advocating for a public health system that's doing it the right way, and sometimes just having another set of eyes on something can lead to better results. That's the role we're playing here.
I know it's early yet, and I believe you set a deadline of February 8th, right, for hospitals to provide information to you. But have you seen any evidence yet or anything early that something might have been amiss?
Yeah, look, Tim, I think the question really, when you boil right down to it, was the guidance given to the hospitals definitive enough that what they did was outside the guidance they were giving, and that given by the Department of Health? And that's why we're looking at this from both angles. What guidance did the Department of Health give to the hospitals, and was their activity consistent with it? If it wasn't, we're going to advocate that it should be going forward, certainly. But we really want to let the public know that we're paying attention in this space, and where we have a place to advocate for the public, we're going to do that.
To be clear, you're not saying that you're going to weigh in on the Department of Health's guidance and what they said to the hospitals. You're looking to make sure the hospitals followed that guidance.
Yeah, and look, a part of this, Tim, will be how clear was the guidance? How definitive was it? How vague was it?
So could you be critical of the Department of Health?
Potentially, yeah, potentially. Look, I'm not in this to criticize people. I'm in this role as healthcare advocate to move the ball forward so that what we get in the end is a better outcome. And we're in communications with the Department of Health all the time. We go to court on their behalf civilly to enforce their actions against gyms that won't do the right thing and close when they're supposed to, or restaurants that won't do what they're supposed to. So we work with them a lot. Again, that's not our prosecutor's role. That's being a healthcare advocate and working with the Department of Health on critical issues.
There's great interest, obviously, in this topic. What's the, especially since it's not heading to hopefully a criminal type of thing, what's the output of this review? Will you make a statement? Will you release a report? Like, how are you going to tell the public what went on here?
Sure. Look, the way I envision our work in this space and similar spaces is to report back to the public what our findings were. And that's what I envision. At some point when we get the information, we'll be able to conclude, whether guidelines were breached or not, whether the guidelines weren't clear enough or not. And then perhaps advocate for something moving forward to avoid a repetition of this loss of public confidence. I think that was the real loss here, right? Whether a handful of people, 10, 20, look, every dose is critical. Whether they got the vaccine and maybe got it out of line, I think is less important, frankly, if you go up to 50,000 feet, than the public losing confidence that the systems are in place to protect them in the right way.
We have a lot of topics we want to cover, but I have one other pandemic question for you. Your counterpart in New York yesterday released a pretty damning report about that nursing home deaths were being severely underreported in New York. Do you see yourself doing any kind of similar review in Rhode Island, or do you think that's spurred from a tip or something that you haven't gotten here?
Not clear, but I will say this. We monitor through our healthcare unit and our Medicaid fraud unit, which handles patient abuse cases. Another part of the office that does not get a lot of attention, frankly. We are monitoring what's going on in nursing homes. If we see trend lines that don't make a lot of sense to us or issues of concern, then we're definitely following up on those.
Have you gotten the vaccine yet?
I have not.
And yeah, I think people will wonder, just because you're looking at this, if as a general officer, if you were offered the vaccine ahead of others in your age group, would you take it?
No, I wouldn't. My view is this. I have a dad who's 91 and my mom is 85, and I won't get the vaccine until my parents and people of similar circumstances have been vaccinated. Look, I'm taking the precautions that if everybody took, we'd be in a much better place, frankly. So I'm masking up, I'm socially distancing, I'm limiting the places I am during the course of my day and weekends. I think if we all do that and the right people get the vaccine in the right order, we'll do fine.
But Lieutenant Governor has argued, as he's pushed for elected officials to get the vaccine more quickly, that that's to allow government to keep functioning. Yeah. And you need to do that same way that members of Congress have gotten the vaccine early. You disagree with that view?
Well, look, I'm able to function. I've been to work every day since this started. I took a day here or there to be home. But the reality is, in my quarantine, but I've been at work every day. My people are at work every day. We've had some positives. We're managing that, but we're continuing to do our jobs. I can continue to do my job without getting the vaccine before others who I think, consistent with Department of Health guidance, ought to get it first.
All right, let's shift gears. I want to talk about the attack on the Capitol. You're a career prosecutor, but you're also a Democrat. There are those in your party who think the impeachment trial of President Trump will distract from the Biden agenda and hurt the country's chances to unify, when it's highly unlikely that there will be enough Republicans to convict. Should the trial move forward?
Yeah, look, I think so. I think a trial is a way to sort of vet these allegations, perhaps get some clarity as to who had what role. But a lot of people think the Department of Justice is better equipped than Congress to do that kind of an investigation. You worked for the Department of Justice. Yeah, look, and I have no doubt that they're doing that. But look, this is a political thing too, right? Words matter, truth matters. How you talk to the voters matter. And I think we saw that here. If you're willing to spin up, if you're willing to leave truth at the curb and spin up theories and get people motivated to do things that they wouldn't do otherwise, there ought to be accountability for that. And that is what I think is the intention in the impeachment trial. Certainly, DOJ's got to do its own job. That's to hold people accountable, not just the people who went into the Capitol that day, but people who organized it, supported it, led it. And that's what they'll do. One thing I learned as a federal prosecutor is that the FBI is particularly good at building these sorts of cases when they are committed to doing it. And that's pretty clear what's happening here.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about that as someone who worked in the DOJ for so long, because the Washington Post reported a few days ago, quote, federal law enforcement officials are privately debating whether they should decline to charge some of the individuals who stormed the U.S. Capitol this month. And the Post said some at DOJ fear, quote, hundreds of such cases could swamp the local courthouses. What do you think of that?
Yeah, look, I think they need to pursue those cases. Having been on the state side and on the federal side, we deal with a tremendous amount of volume on the state side compared to what I used to do as U.S. attorney. The resources are there. The federal government, when it comes to DOJ, has tremendous resources. I believe they can prosecute every one of those cases if they choose to do it.
All right, Jeff Britt, the Jeff Britt trial. He was acquitted of money laundering charges after the trial earlier this year. The day the judge's verdict came down, you gave me an interview. But for the people who didn't catch that, I want to talk just briefly about it now.
Yeah.
This is a big topic. Many people, you've heard it, felt the case was overcharged, and Judge Daniel Procaccini agreed. In hindsight, do you regret pursuing the Britt case?
Yeah, I don't, Tim, and I'll briefly explain why. A lot of things going on in that case. Number one, the 2-year rigmarole that the Board of Elections went through to try to get to the bottom of that activity in that case. Look, to me, that case was about a couple of things: transparency and integrity in our elections. Clearly, if the evidence is, as we believed it to be, that someone made a straw donor or established a straw donor, made a donation on behalf of somebody else, and effectively hid it from a reporting requirement, that doesn't let the public judge who the contributors are to a campaign. I think that's really important, and I think it's really important when the scheme is complex, when it's involved in a really important election, and look, when it's done by somebody who is an experienced political operative. And so when we look back at that conduct, did I think it was serious conduct? I did. Did I think we had the evidence to make the case? I did. And that's my charge going forward. So look, at the end of the day, the system works the way the system works. The judge makes that call. But I believe it's important for us to fight on behalf of those principles: electoral integrity and transparency. And so I don't regret bringing the case, and we're going to continue to be aggressive in that space.
I talked to a lot of people at the State House who remain absolutely mystified why people more powerful than Jeff Britt, who the evidence clearly showed had some knowledge of this whole scheme that they were undertaking for that mailer, face no charges, while the AG's office threw the book only at Britt, who by that point was on the outs with the Speaker's office, while the other folks involved were not. What do you say to that?
Yeah, look, I've done a lot of organizational cases over the course of my career in organized crime, in public corruption, in white-collar crime. And the way you do an organizational case is you work up the organizational chain. And in this case, our organizational cooperator was Victor Pichette. We used him to go the next step up in the organizational chain. You don't keep going up unless you're confident you get to the next step. And look, these cases can play out over time. I go back to the North Providence case, right? We charged initially, when I was U.S. Attorney, the 3 North Providence town councilors. After we convicted them, we then charged the middleman, the man who delivered the bribe on behalf of the developer. We tried him and convicted him. After about a year and a half, when he moved through his appeals, we immunized him and brought the case against the developer. We ultimately didn't convict the developer, but you moved your way through an organizational chain. And that's what we were doing in this case.
Was there any evidence that any of the other people who obviously were not charged in this case were less than honest with the grand jury or the state police investigators on this case?
Yeah, Tim, I'm reluctant to get into what happened before the grand jury, but the way we look at it is this, is what evidence do we have against a particular person? And can we corroborate that evidence? In the case of Mr. Britt, we believe that we could corroborate the testimony of Mr. Pichette. And so that's why we brought the case that we did. Now, where that case would have landed, had the result been different, who knows? But that's how we approach that case. An organizational case where you work through the chain, and what you don't do is skip links in the chain. In other words, you don't go after somebody and cut a deal with somebody further down in the organizational chain if you're not confident you can get the next person moving up.
Okay, we have about a minute to break, so just one last question on this. Judge Procaccini took a blowtorch to the money laundering statute in Rhode Island as written. He said it was unconstitutional. Look, I know if I were a prosecutor, I would not charge anyone with that crime until this thing gets ironed out. Have you reviewed the law since the trial, and are you proposing changes?
We may propose changes. Look, I think you have to look at this case in the context of one judge in one case. What I'm not afraid to do is use tools in the toolbox to address a wrong where I believe that's committed. So look,
even the money laundering statute?
Absolutely. I'm not afraid to use the tools in our toolbox to go after conduct that I think really shakes public confidence. I think public corruption and organized crime have a corrosive effect on this state. And if someone is not aggressively fighting for those principles, then we're not going to ever get where I think the state needs to be.
Okay, we're going to take a break on Newsmakers. When we come back, the Attorney General has made it perfectly clear he does not want to run for governor. So what else might be on the table? Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is Attorney General Peter Neronha. Ted?
General, I'm not going to ask you if you're running for governor in 2022 because you've said so clearly you are not and that you are not interested in it, and we're going to trust you on that. Do you plan to run for re-election as Attorney General currently?
Yeah, that's my expectation. Right now I'm really focused on doing the work in the office, and that's a long way off. But yeah, look, I love the work. I think the work is so compelling and so important. We're really fighting every day for, I think, principles that matter to everyday Rhode Islanders. We just talked about it in public corruption, healthcare, consumer issues, environmental issues. I love the work. I think my experience lends itself to it, so I expect to run for re-election. Yeah.
You and Tim were on Ian Donis's show on public radio this week as well, coincidentally, and you sound so uninterested in being the governor, and I'm actually curious why. I mean, you clearly have enough ambition that you ran for public office in this public office.
Yeah.
Why do you look at the governor's office and not think, oh, that'd be interesting too?
Yeah, look, I don't really feel like I had political ambitions. I wanted to do this work. I've been an assistant attorney general, I've been an assistant U.S. attorney, ran the U.S. attorney's office, obviously, and I felt like my skill set and my experience lent itself to this work, and I realize how important the work is. I don't, first of all, running for office was something it's a necessary means to be able to do the work. So I don't love the electoral process and all of the ancillary stuff that brings. I love talking to people about issues, but not really the politics of it. And look, the governor's job is an important one, and I respect that position. But I just don't have an interest, as somebody asked me once, I don't have an interest in building bridges or doing that kind of work. I don't mean to sound flip about it, but this is the work that I love. I'm a lawyer, and being attorney general really has been the privilege of my adult life. And so I'm just interested in doing this work and really not any other.
So we've been talking about the governor's office. What about any other elected position, say U.S. Senate, if that were to open?
Oh,
would
God,
you be
yeah.
open
Look,
to that?
I don't think about those things, Tim. Look, I'm 57 years old. I've been doing this for a long time. I hope to maybe do it for a little while longer, and then I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the rest of my life and where my wife will be at that point. So I don't have long-term political ambitions. I don't tend to look at my life in that way. I'm grateful for the time that I've had and hope to have in the next few years. But I don't look beyond that.
We're having a big transition in the governor's office. Speaking of the governor's office, I'm curious if you've talked to either the outgoing governor, Gina Raimondo, or the incoming governor, Dan McKee, since all this developed.
I have. I had a brief conversation with the governor. She called basically.
That makes one of us.
She called last week to say goodbye, and we talked about a few issues and around healthcare, for example. And look, I think we can do better.
Really, she was still talking about Rhode Island issues when you talked to her?
Yeah. It was really just a matter of look, where do I see where we need to go, sort of writ large, and I think we can do a more robust job about regulating and being strategic about healthcare. So really brief. And then certainly I reached out to Lieutenant Governor McKee, soon-to-be Governor McKee, a couple of times. He spoke last night, actually, about our legislative priorities and some budget issues. I also obviously offered my support and willingness to help him any way that I could. The reality is we do a lot of work on behalf of the governor's office. During COVID, really guiding some of her executive orders, where they came close, to the constitutional limit, if you will. And so we're going to have a good relationship. I've always had a good relationship with both the governor and the lieutenant governor. I expect that to continue.
I want to pursue that with you because, it has been a lot of controversy around the executive orders that the governor has governed with for nearly a year now in a lot of cases. And I know her office has talked to your office quite a bit when they've been trying to review or when you guys have warned them that they were going too far. What is the limit of what she can do? Because it has been more expansive than a lot of us realized during an emergency. Yeah,
look, it's frankly, she has a tremendous amount of power, particularly in a pandemic, both constitutionally and under state law. What we really tried to do was sort of make sure that what she was doing, what the governor's office proposed to do, didn't sort of fall even beyond that broad scope of authority. But also, take for example, some of the restrictions. When we started, there was only voluntary compliance and criminal enforcement. There was no civil structure in between to sort of, give somebody a fine, if you will. And so we really worked with them and encouraged the Department of Health to put together a civil regulatory scheme that would be something in the middle. Right? You don't want to put someone in jail for opening when they shouldn't, but you also want to have some enforcement authority. So that was the kind of role that we played in many instances, was to try to get them to a place where we could reach the place we wanted to be in addressing this pandemic.
Let's stick with politics just for a little bit. You were unsuccessful in pushing legislation that would have allowed a grand jury report in certain cases. Are you going to file that legislation again?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
It's really important. Really important.
What other legislation is on the table for you?
Certainly our consumer protection bill. We have a really weak consumer protection statute here. It really prevents my office from investigating anything or any business or entity that is regulated by somebody else. So think banking, think public utilities. We can fix that. We need to fix that. And so that bill will be up there again. So really, those are two of the bigger ones that will be up there. We made some good steps in healthcare last year, so we'll be back up there with some of those critical things. I think those are the two big ones for me: grand jury report, and also we want to do a little bit of work in drug enforcement reform. I think we're over felonizing possession of narcotics there. So hopefully make some headway there as well.
Sticking with the grand jury report. In that vein, last month you held a news conference explaining in great detail why the officer involved in the moped crash of Jamal Gonzalez was not going to be charged. The ins and outs of that are on WPRI.com. It's complicated, but not lost on me certainly was you were able to talk about the findings because you did not put the case before the grand jury, unlike the Wyatt Detention Center case where video showed a correctional officer pushing his truck to a crowd of protesters. He wasn't charged either by the grand jury, I should note. Should we glean from the Gonzalez case that you wish you had not put the Wyatt case before a grand jury?
Well, I had to do it there, candidly, because there was evidence I couldn't get without using a grand jury subpoena. Without getting into the details of what that evidence was. I needed it there. I didn't need it in the Gonzalez case, and I said this at the press conference. I was grateful to the civilian witnesses and the police witnesses and people who had video for giving it to us. That's why we need a grand jury report, so that in instances where I do need to use the grand jury as an investigative tool, read the 38 Studios decision. It goes right into that. When I need the grand jury to get me documents, to get me testimony, to put witnesses under oath, and if there are no charges and then I can't explain it, that makes it really difficult for the public to accept. So we definitely need a grand jury report. At a minimum, we need it in cases of alleged police misconduct. At a minimum, we need it there because right now, in some quarters at least, the public distrust of law enforcement is pretty high. I felt like in Gonzalez, if I could explain what we did and why and make it transparent and put all the evidence on our website, I had a chance to reach those who might look at that result with some skepticism. I hope we did that. I know we didn't reach everybody, but that I think was a step forward.
Had you had the grand jury report tool in your toolbox, would you have put the Gonzalez case before a grand jury?
I might have, yeah. I mean, certainly, I might have. I mean, it's hard to say, Tim. What was really critical for me was making sure that I was transparent, making sure that I really understood what had happened. I'm very comfortable with that conclusion. I suppose I could have given it to the grand jury for them to kind of, if you will, do a fact and legal check of me, but I don't think it would have been necessary in that case.
To get that grand jury report, Bill, you need the House Speaker and the Senate President to approve it. Your name was not a favorite, I would hear, in the Speaker's office when Speaker Mattiello was the Speaker for various reasons. You have a new Speaker now, Joe Shekarchi. Have you spoken to Speaker Shekarchi at all? And do you think you might get there might be a more openness to some of the bills you've pushed compared to the last 2 years?
Yeah, look, I can't speak to the past speakers' view of me. I tried to be upfront like I am with everybody about what I wanted to do and why. Certainly Speaker Shekarchi and I believe have a good relationship. I know that's not going to make my bills, any better or worse in his eyes. But I do feel like, look, I have two things when it comes to legislation. Give me a chance to be heard. Let me make my pitch. I understand that it may not resonate with everybody. But I really believe, and call me naive if you like, I really believe that bills ought to get a hearing. They ought to get a hearing in committee. And if they get through committee, they ought to get a vote on the floor. And taking legislation that has some merit, that has some merit to it, and we all know what that means. Let our legislators take a position. Let them debate it. Let the public see that. I believe in transparency. It's not just lip service for me. When we are transparent, we have a better opportunity to convince the public that what we're doing is right, and that serves us and them very well.
You have supported police-worn body cameras, and police departments have said, you've heard it, that the big hurdle is cost.
Yeah.
Last year, you told me you were hoping to help departments with finding some funding, maybe some seed money. Any luck?
Yeah, we're working hard on that. We're prepared to commit a large amount from our own funds that we recover as part of the lawsuits we bring on behalf of the people of the state of Rhode Island to that effort. So we're prepared to sink money into that from our own budget, outside of general revenues, money that we recover, and also help departments find funding, federal funding to do it. We're in the process of putting together a very detailed approach for departments, ways to consolidate how they do it, how they maintain that evidence. We would come up with rules about how it would be disclosed and when, how to incorporate that into the APRA. A lot of departments are concerned. What if somebody asked for all of our body cam footage for the last year? That's a tremendous lift logistically.
And What would you say to that?
Well, we would say this. Look, yeah, as long as you're prepared to pay some dollar amount to pay for it, right? So, look, if you're going to go back and you've got to go through all that footage,
Why
Tim,
wouldn't that public record belong to the public?
Well, it does, Tim, but here's the thing. When you produce that information, the critical part is, what do you do about civilians? That's always the issue with body cam. You've got to have somebody sit down and sort of, I don't know what the right word is, I'll use the vernacular, like kind of fuzz out the faces and make sure that it is appropriate for distribution. We did that in the Gonsalves case. That took a lot of time. We did it. I think we just have to manage how we're going to do that. For a small department with 16 people, to do that kind of a lift could be a financial challenge.
All right, we have about 30 seconds left. Ted asked a good question on the first half back to vaccines, and very briefly about what you'll say when your report is done. Real quick, do you have a timeline? Do you have when you might be done with the vaccine?
Oh yeah, look,
inquiry?
I think a lot of it depends on the information we get and if we have to follow up. But I don't think, I would say within a month, certainly.
Okay. Attorney General Peter Neronha, thank you so much for your time this week. If you missed any of it, it's on WPRI.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.